What's going on, guys? Welcome back to my channel, Al-Tarik Samuel. And here today we're going to talk to you guys about some more questions, right? I wanted to come and give you guys some value, hopefully, along your PMP journey and make sure that you guys have access to good quality resources. I think one of the things that is hard about doing your PMP certification and studying on your own and trying to find the right resources is that you never know what you're going to stumble upon. And so sometimes you have to stumble your way through it in order to get there. I'm trying to minimize that as much as possible because that was my experience, right? And give you guys the value up front. I'm going to show you exactly how to answer these questions, so stay tuned. We're at question 5. If you haven't seen the first 4 questions, go watch that video first. I gave some good pointers. But on this video, we're going to go through some more questions, and I want you guys to pay close attention to how I'm breaking down these problems, right? Try to understand how a project manager needs to think in order to solve the problems on the PMP certification. So without further ado, we're going to move into question 5. So question 5 says, excuse me, during one of your working group meetings, a stakeholder raises the concern that the product you are working on will be discontinued in the next 5 months. You are not aware of this, and your project budget has already been approved until the scheduled delivery, which is in 5 months. What will you do next? Now, when you're evaluating some of these questions, you want to make sure that you're paying attention to the key words. What will you do next? And if I could highlight that right now, I would, but next is the word that you need to be paying attention to. Let's go through the answer choices. A, keep the project going as it is. The discontinued product isn't your responsibility. Now, while it may not be your responsibility, it is what has given you this job. And so you're a project manager for this product. You need to make sure that you are trying to get as much value out of it as possible so that you can be successful down the road, right? You want to deliver value. That's your job as a project manager. And if you're not worrying about what the product will be doing in the future, you're not looking ahead, you're not going to be conducive to the mindset of PMI, right? So I don't think A is the right answer. B, set a meeting with your project sponsor to share the information and a recommendation to terminate the project. Now, one thing that you don't want to do is jump to conclusions. You want to analyze the situation usually in something like this, figure out what's actually going on, why it's going to be discontinued, why they think that, and see if there's an alternative, especially if you think this project has value, right? So B is a little bit too far forward. Maybe you would do this if there was no other option. C, change the scope of the project to meet a different product so your project can remain relevant. I mean, submitting a change request is something that you can do, especially if you think it's going to keep the product relevant. And so that's definitely an option that you should weigh. And in this specific instance, it may be a good answer. D, ask for the additional funding to see if you can improve the product instead of discontinuing it. Now, asking for funding without any analysis of why you need it won't really bode over well with any stakeholders or any sponsors. And so I would say no to this until you understand some more information. Let's go back and read the question over again. So it will be discontinued in the next 5 months. You are not aware of this, and your project budget has already been approved until the scheduled delivery, which is in 5 months. What will you do next? So with this particular question, I'd probably go with answer C. I think that you're not gonna be able to change the scope yourself. And because you're not able to change the scope yourself, and this is kind of implying, I'm gonna go with B. Right? Set a meeting with your project sponsor to share information and a recommendation to terminate the project. It's important that you guys are sharing information between each other. So let's see what this says. I'm very eerie on this one, but it's between B and C. I'm going with B. And it's B. Wow. Oh, wow. I skipped it. I'll go back. So it was B, and this question is about delivering value. Like I said, you want to deliver value as a project manager. That's your primary focus for a project. Primary motivator for a project, right? It's if the project is no longer aligned with the business need or it seems unlikely to provide value, the organization may choose to terminate the effort, right? PMBOK Guide, 7th edition, 2021, page 35, focus on value. That was a tricky one, right? We were able to pull that out in the end, go with B. I think it's important that you guys share that information and you're more inclined to do some analysis, right? In that sharing of information of why it needs to be terminated. It's very hard for me to suggest that somebody goes directly into action. You need to analyze the situation first and then move forward from there. And what makes sense is what you're gonna have to go with. You're always gonna be able to narrow down to 2 answers, but you're gonna have to choose between those 2 answers, and we chose correctly. So just take note of it. If you saw something in there that I didn't see, take note of it, and hopefully it'll help you on the next question. So question 6, you've collected the requirements for your project and are creating the scope statement and work breakdown structure. During this process, you notice some functionality in your database system that will help a different project you are aware of within your project management office, PMO. What will you do next? A, place the feature in the other project's backlog and ask them to prioritize it as soon as possible. Not really. B, raise the functionality in your risk register as a threat with the response to mitigate. No, that doesn't answer the question. All right, you saw something that has some functionality that may apply to a different project, may bring value to a different project. We're not talking about threats here. C, add the scope to your project and complete it as soon as possible. No, that's not what your project was based off of. You're not going to go solve a different problem. D, raise the functionality in your risk register as an opportunity with the response to exploit and meet with the other project team and sponsor to discuss. That is a perfect answer, right? What you want to do, right? Not all threats, right? How do I say this? Not everything in the risk register is negative, right? It can be positive. It can be opportunities, right? It's not always threats. So the fact that they talked about the risk register and it being an opportunity, right, is key. Raise the functionality in your risk register as an opportunity, because that's what it is, with the response to exploit, right? You want to exploit every opportunity you can, because if there's value there, you want to get it out of the project. And then you're gonna meet with the other project team and sponsor to discuss. And what that means is you're not gonna take on this project yourself because you believe in the functionality of it. No, you're gonna pass it off to somebody else for them to complete, so that they can complete that project, and hopefully it adds value to their team, right? You're being a team player. And so D has to be the answer, in my opinion. It's the only answer on the board that makes sense. And it's D, right? Systems thinking involves taking a holistic view of how project parts interact with each other in external systems. Projects operate within programs, and the small systems affect larger ones. Finding a previously unknown opportunity, the next best step is to make it known and exploit the opportunity. Right? You can find this in the PMBOK Guide, 7th edition, 2021, page 39. Respond to system interaction, systems thinking. Right? It's important that you guys are looking at what you can do to add value, and making sure that you are sticking to your own project. When it calls for it, you can add certain things to the scope through change request, but you got to make sure that you're doing it in the correct order, right? And that's always important. And if you don't know the order, you guys need to go back and study the processes, right? What makes up the processes, the different domains, so that you can truly grasp the concept of order within each methodology, right? Whether you're doing agile or traditional, predictive is traditional, predictive method or agile method, you need to understand and grasp both concepts before you come and start to try to answer some questions. A lot of people just jump into the questions. No, you need to have that base knowledge in order for you to truly understand what you're dealing with, and look for those key terms. So 7, you're working on a high profile project. Several high ranking senior executives want to take the credit for this initiative while limiting the impact to their own resources. This has led to several conflicts and a scope statement that is unclear, leading to a risk of project failure. What will you do next? And what will you do next? It's always next, right? What's the next thing for you to do? That's what most questions ask, and so that's how you need to evaluate the question. This question in itself is talking about an unclear scope statement, right? Several conflicts between the stakeholders and what their expectations are. You need to make sure that you have a clear first, and concise scope statement that makes sense, right? Because if you're not solving for something specific, you're not solving for anything. And so that's why it's important for you to have something specific and for everybody to be in agreement of what it is, so that you guys can have a positive benefits realization package, right? Where whatever you produce is accepted at the end of the project. But let's talk about what these answer choices are. So A, create a scope statement yourself to avoid further conflict. No, right? You're never going to create a scope statement by yourself. This is not your project. You're not funding it. You're just running it and managing it, right? Project manager. B, facilitate a discussion with the executives as a neutral third party, focusing on agreed project goals. That's perfect, right? That's something you would want to do next, right? You have several conflicts. Scope statement's unclear. You don't know what you're solving for. People don't agree. You need to get everybody together and gain some shared understanding of what we're trying to accomplish here. C, limit your project resources to the executives until they can agree on a way forward. No, no, you don't want to do anything like that. This is going to produce conflict, and that's something you want to stay away from, especially when you're trying to solve conflict and there's already conflict, right? You're going to escalate it a little bit more. De-escalate the issue to the project steering committee and ask them to resolve the problem. Now, this is a last resort type of option. You would use this option if you were unable to get any of the stakeholders to agree on a scope statement, right? Or for people to truly come together and gain some shared understanding. Like if they are unwilling to work with each other, then yes, this is something that you would do at that point. But I'm going to go with B, facilitate a discussion with the executives as a neutral third party, focusing on agreed project goals. And it's B, right? Leadership is not the same as authority. When senior managers suffer conflict over priorities, neutral facilitation helps more than detailed recommendations. Leadership acumen involves focusing a team around agreed goals, generating consensus on the way forward, and negotiating and resolving conflict and more. This is in the PMP Guide, 7th edition, 2021, page 42, where you're demonstrating leadership behaviors. So, question 8. You're managing a project where the majority of the product has been planned up front, but an external system is needed from a vendor in partial pieces where the requirements are unclear. Half of your stakeholders want to use a waterfall approach, and the other half are advocating for an agile approach. What will you do next, right? A, use an agile methodology. The fixed scope is a low risk, and you can capture changes using agile. So let's go back and read the question, right? An external system is needed from a vendor in partial pieces where the requirements are unclear, right? That's the problem that you need to solve, right? And some people want a waterfall approach and other people want the agile approach. You should know the difference between the two before you try to answer this question. B, use a waterfall methodology and ask the team to plan the uncertain scope better. C, proceed with the hybrid method to start with pre-planned scope but agile ceremonies that promote feedback. That's not a bad answer, right? If you don't understand what specifically is required, you want to continuously try to solve the problem and give feedback, right? Because that feedback is going to help you on the next iteration try to accomplish the task at hand, right? And some of the objectives of what your project is about and what you're trying to solve. D, use a combination of waterfall and agile to capture all requirements and keep stakeholders happy. That's just never going to be possible. Some people are going to be upset about this. You already said you don't understand some of the requirements, so how are you going to capture all of the requirements? That makes no sense. So D is wrong. A, I would go no to A, especially because it's talking about the fixed scope, right? We don't have a fixed scope, right? Majority of the product has been planned up front, but the external system that is needed and where the requirements are unclear, right? You don't have something fixed on there, right? The fixed scope is low risk. You can capture changes using agile. I wouldn't go with that. So for me, it's between B and C, but I think C is the way better answer. You're talking about proceeding with the hybrid methodology where you can kind of accomplish both, right? Use predictive methods where you can, and then agile to promote that feedback and get to accomplish a task. So we're going to go with C, and it's C. Each project is unique, and success is based on adapting to the unique context of the project to determine the most appropriate methods. The tailoring approach is iterative in nature and refined during